happens that we have really this local classroom. So we call it bring your own classroom. So if you are at a university or a research institute or something and you have a group of people that are really interested in the topic and you want to bring them together and learn together and make this like a communal learning experience, you can gather them in a classroom in person or also if you want to in Zoom.
This is Samantha Wittke, and the kind of classroom she is talking about is to teach researchers and scientists how to write better code they need for their research projects. And the program that Samantha is part of is, as she just said, the Code Refinery. And together with her two colleagues, Radovan Bast and Richard Darst, we talk about how Code Refinery works, how it developed, and where Radovan, Richard and Samantha think it's going in future. But first, a very warm welcome back to Code for Thought. I hope you all had a very nice summer break. This is the first episode of the new winter season of 2025 of the podcast, and as you've just heard, I'm going to talk about Code Refinery with my guests, Samantha, Richard and Radovan. Training researchers how to write more sustainable software for their work is, as one of the people I interviewed a while back once said, a gift that keeps on giving. And Code Refinery is not alone in this. There are other programs like the Carpentries, for instance. Code Refinery, as you will hear, has started its life and work in the north of Europe. But as the demand for digital skills and research isn't going away anytime soon, they've been growing gradually beyond the Nordic countries. But let's hand over to my guests now, who will quickly introduce themselves. So here they are.
Hi, Peter, and hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having us here. My name is Radovan Bast. I work at the University of Tromsø in northern Norway and also part of the Norwegian Research Infrastructure Services. And really, since the last decade, I work at the interface between research, computing, and programming, and I really enjoy helping researchers with tools and training. I self-identify as research software engineer.
Good. Thank you, Richard.
I'm Richard Darst. I work at Aalto University in the Helsinki area in Finland. I work on a team of research software engineers where we combine doing stuff for people, trying to help develop our infrastructure in a good direction, and teaching. And that's how I'm involved in Code Refinery.
And finally, but not least, Samantha.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for having us. My name is Samantha Wittke, and I'm a research software engineer at CSE, the IT Center for Science in Finland. My background is in geoinformatics, and nowadays I work a lot with supporting researchers starting their journey into scientific and high-performance computing, and doing a lot of events, workshops, training on research software engineering, data science, and HPC. I'm also the community manager for the Code Refinery project and a member of the Nordic RSE Association.
Right, yeah, exactly, because there's the Nordic RSE Association that we should probably throw in here as well, because you had your first conference in 2024, I understand. But back to Code Refinery, there is, of course, something that we're probably going to touch on in our conversation later on, the carpentries. So there are various different initiatives to actually teach people how to code, and not only how to code, but how to do software engineering in general. But could you give us a quick overview of what Code Refinery is and what it does?
At Code Refinery, we focus on helping research and software engineers to improve how they develop and maintain the software for research. So we teach kind of the level 1 RSE training in fair research software development, fair here being findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. The topics of our workshops are the tools that are required for that, but often skipped in the academic curriculum, stuff like version control, GitHub, automated testing, documentation, reusability, and so on. That we do teach via workshops, which are large online or smaller in-person workshops to all levels, all domains, from students to professors and RSE to Bs. and also for all programming languages. But within Code Refinery, we are not only doing like these workshops, we're also, and Richard came up with that term, a training cooperative. So a community of people that are really excited about this topic. And we are Nordic based, but also slowly expanding towards the rest of Europe and even, can we say, the world? And we are very welcome, we're happy for anyone who wants to join. And what we do there is basically keeping in contact via our chat. We are sharing the training work and collaborating on training. We also try to keep the barrier low to have new people and new organizations joining this effort. And as you mentioned already, there's a significant overlap between people working in Code Refinery and then also being a member or being somewhat active in the Nordic RSE community. So we are not a legal entity because we are a project that has been long running since 2016. So that makes it also rather small, flexible, and informal. So we can go with the flow, and it's still easy to change and update things there.
So you mentioned 2016, but what was the run-up to setting up something like the Code Refinery? Why a Code Refinery, and what motivated you to get involved? Radovan.
So 11, 12 years ago, I was working in Stockholm, also in computing, high-performance computing. And then I just want to give a shout out to my former boss then, Erwin Laure, who then came into my office and said, "Hey, Radovan, I know you like Git and GitHub and tools for testing, documenting. Wouldn't you like to give a 1-week course on this?" Well, twist my arm. I mean, definitely. So we did a 1-week long course in 2014 in Stockholm, which was back then open to Swedish PhD students, postdocs. It was really successful. We realized that this is a course that was missing. People were looking for a course in tools that people were expected to use, but never got a formal training in it. So it really felt like we were filling a gap. We gave this course then a second time the year after, again in person, again in Stockholm. At the time, I did not know anything about carpentries. It was clear to us that we are filling a gap, and this is not a local problem. This is not a problem that exists only in Stockholm or only in Sweden. We knew that many PhDs and postdocs and students are struggling with this, me including. So also during my studies, I was really kind of learning it from other people on the internet. And then, so 2015, NAIC, the Nordic Infrastructure Collaboration, which is a collaboration between Nordic infrastructure providers. So these are centers that provide high-performance computing resources. So they realized that, well, we could take it to the Nordic level. The Nordics seemed like a good scale for this, and we could try to reach people all across the Nordics, and we could also try staff all across the Nordics to collaborate on this. So then we wrote a proposal. The proposal was granted, and really then the NAIC took it over, and then since 2016 we run it as a Nordic project. So that was the history. And then it's only really when Code Refinery itself started 2016 that I also learned about carpentries and went to a carpentries instructor training, was really amazed.
It took off from there then?
From there, this was 2016, we started with a 2-year project, later a 3-year project, and started doing courses all across the Nordics. Before COVID, it was all in person, so we had a roadshow, basically inviting ourselves to universities and offering a 3-day workshop in person.
I think we're going to talk about COVID a little bit later. Mm-hmm. So thanks very much, Radovan, for that overview. You mentioned the word HPC, high performance computing there. So what is the specific link then between the Code Refineries and the high performance computing community? Is there actually a special link?
The link is historical, and in our courses we most of the time actually don't teach high performance computing. We teach really basic programming tools for reproducibility. It doesn't have to be high performance, can be laptop performance. The link to the high performance computing community is that the original staff was funded and joined from different high performance computing centers across the Nordics. So these were the organizations that funded it. So our funding mostly comes from high-performance computing, but I would say 90% of what we teach is not really high-performance computing. We also give courses in high-performance computing. We like to do that too, and then we also like to do that in the Code Refinery style. We can later talk about what that is. Also by the fact that through our network and through our outreach, we are likely to reach users of high-performance computing centers, which means that many learners that come to our courses also use these resources.
Richard, we haven't heard from you yet. So what I would like to know from you is how you got involved in Code Refinery and what do you do there?
Yeah, well, it was a slow evolution. So I wasn't part of Code Refinery at the beginning when it was initially funded and all, but I learned about it within the first year via a conference. And then I said, hey, would you like to come teach at our university? And we invited the teachers. They came. It was a huge success. A room of 40 or 50 people was full up there. And we just kept inviting them back from then on twice a year, basically. So in the Helsinki region, there's always been enough people to fill up the courses. So they kept coming back, and each time they came back, I got a little bit more involved in actively teaching and so on. And that's really how I think a lot of the people have gotten involved.
We mentioned one of the other keywords, COVID. Not so much a keyword, but kind of a seismic event, which changed the way code refineries are run. So you mentioned before that they were run face-to-face, in person, but obviously COVID changed all that. And how did it change the way that you run the code refineries today?
So, like everyone else, COVID was a big shock. I'd like to think that overall for Code Refinery it was a positive shock because the way it was before with people traveling to give workshops, I have a feeling wouldn't be sustainable. Like a few designated instructors traveling to give workshops, I have a feeling wouldn't be sustainable. So we needed to somehow make that simpler.
Right.
So we started online with the typical Zoom teaching, which many people did. I believe first we gave a course that had 20 or 30 people online, pretty typical. Then we tried to give a course that had 100 people online, and we really focused on the breakout room experience. So put a lot of time into organizing the breakout rooms, forming teams, keeping the teams together over all 6 days. And it worked well. But something I had become interested in slightly before was online streaming. So basically mass communication, where you'd have a platform that can make a stream which is available to everyone and different types of interaction tools like a chat thing.
Is there something like YouTube, for instance, that I think they can do?
YouTube, Twitch, these different things. So basically Zoom is designed for a relatively small number of people to actively communicate. And once it gets large, then there tends to not be much interaction anyway. So why not use something that's designed for mass communication and then take advantage of the ways it's designed to interact with? It's formed a way where we can reach more people, and we have a notes document for the communication, and we have a lot more different types of roles of people. So we have teachers who focus on teaching. We have a bunch of helpers who answer questions. We have organizers and so on that can bring people in and organize local in-person events for watching, basically. And this sort of mass communication has meant that we can reach more people, and it somehow becomes more sustainable.
There are a couple of questions that popped to my mind actually immediately. Yep. The first one, of course, is how hard was the transition from face-to-face to online? And maybe we can touch on that first, because the other one was then, it's quite a sophisticated operation by the sound of it. So you have the online teacher, then you have the helpers, then you have the local representatives to make it all work. But let's start with how hard was the transition from face-to-face to, whoops, here's a Zoom call?
I would say for us, the transition was not that hard because it was very gradual. But I can see that if someone tried to jump directly to our end state, it actually would be a lot harder because you're trying to do many things at the same time.
I can maybe add that the workshops that we run are very interactive, very exercise driven. And initial difficulty that we had, but many similar initiatives had, was to not being able to see the room, not being able to see who is following, who needs more time, who has maybe fallen off. So to keep the interactivity and maybe change how we do this interaction, how can we collect questions from the room? And we realized that we can do that now much better than before. So we believe that we can engage people better in terms of collecting questions and getting feedback than maybe in an in-person room. The other big change was how to onboard new instructors. In some sense, it became easier because now we don't have to travel. It's at least financially, administratively, it became much easier. What then became more difficult is the technical part of it. And therefore, we have now this setup where we try to do co-teaching, co-instructing. So there is not a single instructor. We teach together, and it's like having a co-pilot seat in an airplane open for a new instructor to join. So now the onboarding focuses more on the tech, the controls, on how to interact with the stream, how to see the questions. So it's been really interesting to go through this transition. And I also wanted to say that for the project, to meet Richard and to meet Samantha was incredibly fortunate, both to reach a much bigger audience, but also to have this connection to the community. This has been really, really fortunate for the project.
At what stage in the process did you realize that Zoom isn't enough? And what made you then turn to streaming? So I'd like to understand that a little bit better.
Right.
Because you mentioned that you can't see the room, which is true if you do an online course. Well, you can see the room, but a lot of the time people actually turn the camera off. And of course, you only see their face. You don't know if they're actually doing something, following the exercise or etc. So you pick up less signals than you do if you're in the room. But how does Twitch and YouTube streaming actually help you with that?
The streaming started for our Alto internal courses. Well, when we were streaming, they weren't actually internal because anyone could attend. But I think it was maybe 1 year after COVID started that we began trying streaming. Once we saw that worked with Code Refinery, it was maybe 1.5 years or 2 years into COVID, we started streaming.
I think it was in 2021. And the huge advantage was that we were always concerned about privacy. Then suddenly we realized, well, we don't have to tell the learners, please be careful about your camera, please be careful about your microphone. We now don't have to spend time editing away learners who may accidentally show up somewhere, and can then publish the recording very often on the same day. So our editing has also changed. We are not concerned anymore about privacy. We can focus on other things in the editing process.
All right. So it's making that simple, because in Zoom, when you invite people, you see, of course, all the little windows, and when you do a camera, for instance, you can see that. In streaming, you only see the instructor, but basically the presentation mode. But how does the streaming help you with the interaction? So you mentioned there are chat channels where people can contribute and say, I have a question. But when you do exercises, how does that work?
So it's not actually chat channels that we're using during the workshop, but it's a collaborative notes document. So we have one document where we share all the necessary links to the materials, where we are right now, everything basically learners need to know, and they can also share their questions at this moment. And then we have people apart from the instructors that are also answering these questions. So we have this living document where learners can either read while multitasking with the stream and with the teaching, or just leave it aside and do that later, because it's all collected in one page. That part is also essential to having this kind of interaction possible with the stream, because there is no chat there, or we at least don't follow the Twitch chat, but everyone can interact with the instructors directly or with the people behind the scenes via these collaborative notes.
I think we're coming now to the question about what the format of the course actually is and looks like. Radovan, it was you who mentioned that it's very much practice focused, so there are exercises. Do you have some kind of basic structure, how it works, and for how long the course runs?
Maybe a good example from what one of my colleagues said. It's like watching TV. Like, imagine you're watching a big sports event. There's sometimes you're there and you're watching the players play, and then there's a commercial break. And then you take the time to interact with the people that are here with you in the room. So what we really encourage is that the audience, the learners, get together in small rooms, and then they form these exercise teams. So there's the watching the instructors, and then the instructors say, okay, now we have a exercise. And then the stream will go muted for 20 minutes or whatever the time is. And then the learners can work together on it, hopefully helping each other. They can use the notes document in order to ask questions asynchronously. And then we have a bunch of people that are answering these questions at the same time, and then collect feedback that way. So basically, by the questions which are being asked, the instructors can see how it's going on. And this is a really big change. So normally in a in-person lecture or a Zoom lecture, you could expect questions occasionally. But here during any exercise session, there could very well be multiple questions per minute coming in, and all getting answers within a few seconds of them being asked. It actually can give you a lot more feedback of how people are doing. It's in a slightly different form.
So the formats then, you still probably have some kind of introduction to the subject.
Right, yes.
And then you have the exercises, as you said, Richard. Then you have the breakout groups. I think that concept is the same as in Zoom as it is in Twitch and YouTube,
exactly.
I guess.
Yeah.
And then you have the document, which people use to do questions, but also, where the exercises are probably there. So for how long does this run then? So what is the standard session length? How much time do people need to take aside?
Our typical workshop is 6 half days over 2 weeks, and a half day is 3 hours. We typically do 15-minute discussion, introduction, demonstration, and in between every hour we try to do a 20-minute exercise block. And we also put a lot of care into involving individual learners. So we have teams that join as a team, but we also have many learners who join individually. And we try to also engage individual learners in collaborative exercises, which is tricky, but also very interesting.
How do you keep it all together, and how do you keep the people engaged? I know that the documents probably helps a little bit because, you can see what's happening there. But as an instructor at the front of the camera, so to speak, so how do you know how engaged the room is?
I guess one important thing to note is it's not one person keeping it together. So for every single course, there's always 2 instructors there. And if you look at many different professional activities, people work in teams. So oftentimes there'd be one person who's focused on the active teaching and moving the course forward, and the other co-instructor takes on the voice of the audience, so to say. So instead of one instructor saying something and looking for heads noddings to see what's going on, it's like a discussion between these 2 co-instructors for which the audience is listening to, and one of the co-instructors is the voice there. So the co-instructor who's not actively teaching can follow the notes and then raise up questions to the speaker immediately when they see something going on there. We have other helpers in the background who are also answering the questions and can say things by chat. So basically, it's not one person. It really is a big team working together. And that's why it's so cool to teach this way. Also, one other good point is during these exercise sessions, it's not like a Zoom meeting where the instructors have to be quiet. We mute the stream. So in the 20 minutes that the students are working on it, the instructors can actually take that time to talk about what's going on, read things, discuss among themselves without anyone else hearing, and then plan for what comes next. This also lets you sort of get feedback and adjust dynamically to how things are going. So pretty typically the 5 minutes before you come back from exercise session, the 2 co-instructors will look together at the note, say, okay, this seemed to work well. Let's take our 5 minutes to review this exercise because that's where we think the struggles are.
And also just to give you a feeling of the size of the classroom, it can sometimes be 200, 300 persons.
Wow.
And we had cases where we got a new question coming in on the notes every 2 minutes. So there is somebody constantly typing and replying questions. It's also these questions and the feedback on how things are going. They give us a feeling of, are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? Should we focus on something and not focus on something else? This is a little bit our view into the classroom.
It's quite an operation, actually. So you have the 2 main instructors. I call them the main instructors. But then you have the helpers. How are they getting involved? People are joining individually. They can also join in groups. But how do you select and organize then the helpers? And how is their role then? Samantha?
It happens that we have really this local classroom. So we call it bring your own classroom. So if you are at a university or a research institute or something, and you have a group of people that are really interested in the topic, and you want to bring them together and learn together and make this like a communal learning experience, you can gather them in a classroom in person, or also if you want to in Zoom, and then join the Code Refinery workshop in the classroom. That would mean you watch on a big screen what the instructors are saying. And once the stream is muted, because it's going into an exercise session, you can start discussing amongst yourself in your classroom. You get the training from outside, from Code Refinery, but you can discuss with the people that you're actually working with. We have gotten some feedback that people have really enjoyed that, and also that they can build this connection of people who know about topics that Code Refinery also teaches about, get the connection to the actual researchers in the universities or in the research institutes. So they don't necessarily have to get too close to the Code Refinery instructors, but they learn from people they already know. Mm-hmm. And then we have the helpers in the collaborative notes, for example. For those, we usually make an open call in our chat platform or also on our newsletter. So everyone who is interested in just getting a feel on how these workshops work and knows a little bit about these topics can take part in that. They are then just sitting like we do now, sitting in their home, following the collaborative notes document, following the stream and typing the answers there. And then in our chat platform, in our internal chat platform, we have one channel where we then also have this direct contact to the instructors where we can raise important issues.
It involves obviously a lot of people, and there is also a very specific way in which you do this in order to make this a success. Obviously, you have classes of sometimes 200 people, as Radovan said. So how do you onboard people? So how does this work? How do you bring new instructors and new helpers along?
We are also for that doing open calls, and we tried now also a little bit more to go to conferences and talk about these workshops and say that it's like open for everyone, because often Code Refinery is connected to this Nordic and people don't know, oh, can I actually join this? I'm not from the Nordics and so on. So we want to tell that it's okay. Like, we are looking for new partners, new instructors that want to teach with us, that want to learn with us. We do an instructor training about once a year where people that are interested in teaching the Code Refinery way, quote unquote, can learn about how that goes. Yeah, so easiest way to get in contact about that, if people are interested, is via the chat or via our support email address. Then we also do instructor meetups, especially for these co-instructors that they get to meet. They talk to one another, and usually we do it so that one is a more experienced instructor who has done that lesson before, so they can discuss a little bit how to do it and learn from one another.
You mentioned partners. So how do you work with other institutions or organizations, the ones that specialize in teaching software engineering, best practices, filling the gap that universities don't teach students? So how's your relationship with all the other ones? Radovan?
When this whole thing started, we were not aware of the carpentries. But then I went to carpentries instructor training. It was super amazing. I then realized that we really need to also change the way we teach, because before it was mostly going through a slide deck and then a completely separate exercise session. So after going through the carpentries instructor training, we changed the format. We took a lot of inspiration, both for the way of teaching, a way of running the exercises, a way of running code alongs, type alongs. At the beginning, we used the carpentries lesson template because we want to be close. Like, the website should look similar to what people have seen in a basic carpentries course. Back in 2016, the typical carpentries workshop was very basic. It was targeting novices. So there was really a gap, and our niche was to then focus on the intermediate level. Our typical learner persona was student or researcher who already writes code or scripts in some programming language and can use help in how to collaborate better, how to make it more usable. Then over the years, since we have grown larger and larger and can reach more and more people, I would say that our learner persona that we optimize for has changed. And it was a good thing. So now we try to welcome beginners. We have many beginners in our courses also. We have adjusted our material to try to meet learners where they are instead of the way I might be working. But also at the same time, carpentries have then grown. There are intermediate level courses. There are other initiatives have started in many places trying to fill exactly the same gap. And what is nice is that these different initiatives, they are not in any competition. What we do and what we need to do even more is connect these initiatives so that people who find one also know about the others, that we share our resources. And there is a lot of good effort on trying to collaborate together on a common material. There will still be a need for tailored, customized materials, but some of it we can share instead of reinventing it.
You made a good point there, Radovan, because the gap is actually huge, right? So in the sense that so many people need that, almost every researcher, because universities haven't yet started to fill that gap of teaching best practices and basic needs. One organization isn't enough to fill that gap, basically. So you need several. And it's good to see that it's actually coming together and that you're talking to each other. So I would like to finish talking about the funding. It's actually quite an involved operation, as we've heard. So you have 6 half days. So I guess you do that at particular times in the year, sort of not on a continuous basis, because then you would need to have more or less a permanent set of instructors. But still, it needs support, and that usually also means financial support. So you mentioned projects. I would like to be interested to find out how the code refineries are supported to keep it going and what the future looks like.
So how is it funded? Originally, it was basically external funding from this Nordic e-infrastructure collaboration. In the last 3 years, we have been using this in-kind model. In-kind model meaning that we try to motivate organizations to allow their staff to work 1 day a week or 2 days a week for the benefit of this project, but also for the benefit of their development, and hopefully we can motivate also for the benefit of the organization. We are now concluding the 3rd funding phase, and as we speak, basically, we are writing a proposal for the next phase. It is very likely that for the next 3 years, we will try to continue in this model, in this in-kind model. But one goal of the next phase will be to also actively seek funding, for instance, from the European Union, to really make this bigger, to go beyond the Nordics, not only by offering the stream and learning opportunities, but also by seeking funding beyond the Nordics. And I think an important key in the future of the project will be how we involve others in this project. How can we motivate individuals and organizations to join? And maybe Richard and Samantha can help me there too, add some thoughts.
Maybe I can mostly comment on the in-kind model because that's what Alto's done. Basically, we need these kinds of courses, and we have some staff that can teach in it, but don't have time to organize the whole thing. Why not join together? We contribute teaching, some coordination, so on, and we get a much bigger team to work together. And that works really well for us. There's a lot of different types of positions for different teaching styles, whether it's active teaching or watching notes or coordinating. And I think it's really something that anyone else could do right now if they wanted.
Yeah, and I would like to add here also that this in-kind model is also not the only way to join the fun. So the most easy way and very helpful way is for organizations or also individuals to send participants our way, like tell them about Code Refinery workshops. They are free and open for all. Like we talked about the stream, so everyone can watch them. Also just separate topics if there's like something specifically interesting for them, or then also organizing these local breakout rooms. Then, of course, we have individuals that are just really curious on how this code teaching and how the workshops work and are excited about teaching, and they just take the time to teach with us without really getting the organization themselves involved. We also have some members who prefer actually not to teach, but to rather help like in the background with the collaborative notes or with the organization of the event. We have registration form and website and all this kind of stuff to do. So there's also a lot of these like smaller tasks that people can do, but it's an ongoing process, and we are very happy to hear about how it went for people and what they would like to do if they're interested in working with us. And we have also the ambassador program, the Code Refinery ambassador program, which we have started because we noticed that there is a lot of people out there that like what we do, but they don't have time themselves to be a teacher, to be involved in the workshops or in the general work, but who like to share about it. So we try to gather them together get feedback from them. What can we provide to make this easier? Bring them also together to form a little bit of this community of practice, to share experiences if they did this local breakout room, this own classroom, or an own workshop on a related topic, or reused our materials or so on. So that's also a nice way to stay informed and get a little bit involved.
One question, and that's the final one, really. So I said the previous question would be final, but it wasn't, because I just remembered something. And this is really how the code refineries are run themselves, because there's now quite a few people involved. I mean, apart from you three, there are the other instructors and the helpers. But what's the kind of governance model? For me, that's interesting because, that kind of varies a little bit on other open source or community projects. How does it work for you?
So the governance has evolved, whereas it started as a normal project. Now we realize it's really more a community. It's an open community. It's community driven. It's also at a time where we maybe need to formalize the governance, and we are working on that. And we really want to make it open. We want to be open for individuals and organizations to join, and also that it needs to be clear to them that everything we produce will be given back to the community. It's open source. We have a shared intellectual property in what we do. And we are now in the process of formalizing exactly that. It's much more a community now than a project.
How can people reach you?
Yeah, so we have a website, coderefinery.org. There you can find all information. There's also a whole bunch of pages for joining as an individual, as an organization, and so on, where all what we have been discussed is also written down. And we are hanging out together with the Nordic RSE community in our Zulip chat, and also that link can be found on the website. And we are very, very happy for everyone who wants to join us there. We share events, thoughts about teaching, thoughts about fair research software development, but also then, because there's a lot of people from HPC, stuff about HPC and other related topics.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Radovan, Richard, and Samantha, and I wish you all the best for the Code Refinery in future.
Thanks so much for having us here in your virtual studio, and also big thanks for Code for Thought. It's such an important platform for the community so that where we can learn. Big thanks for that.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
If you're interested in the work of Code Refinery or think about contributing to it, why not get in touch with them? You find the link to the website in the show notes. As I mentioned at the beginning, training and filling the digital skills gap is occupying the minds of a lot of people, and it gets regularly discussed at conferences and workshops, like the Research Software Engineering Conference at the University of Warwick in the UK, for example, which will start in just a week's time from the moment of this episode going live, that is, the 9th of September. The reason I mention this is that they have a satellite event on training on Friday the 12th of September, following the main conference. And talking about the conference, I'll be there too, and I hope to see some of you. Next week, we're going to hear from Christian Gutschel. Christian works at the University College in London and has been involved with one of the biggest and, some would argue, most exciting science experiments, the ATLAS project at CERN, a physics experiment studying the elementary building blocks of matter. And I do hope to see you then. And finally, if you want to support this show and want to leave a little something, and I hope you do, I have a tipping jar called en.tippy.com, and you find the link also in the show notes. Oh, time's up. See you next time. But before I forget, this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons license. See ya.